Welcome to this week's episode of Being Human. Delighted to say I'm here with Craig Fenton, a man of many hats. He's the Strategy and Operations Director for Google UK, Ireland and Southern Europe. He is also has a record label, Big Community Records. He's a YouTuber with the podcast Coffee, Eggs and Inspiration. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Richard. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Now, I guess what's fascinating about you as a guest is, where do we start? Craig is the YouTuber, Craig is the Google executive, Craig is the music guy. So I wonder if you could just sort of set us up before we dive into any one of those streams with a little bit of your backstory. I know you're from your New Zealand originally. Just give us a sort of potted history of you getting to where you are today.
It's been a fairly interesting random walk, I would say. So I grew up in New Zealand. My first career, I was a court lawyer. I was a barrister. Did that for about 6 years. The internet came along. That looked pretty interesting. Wanted to get into that. Didn't know how. So I thought, well, I'd go back to university, moved to the UK to do an MBA. Did the MBA at London Business School. Came out, joined a company called Accenture. It was Anderson Consulting at that time, which I felt would give me an opportunity to work with many different businesses in different areas and industries and countries, and kind of just figure out what this sort of business thing was, what digital disruption was, and had a wild time there over several years in several countries, always living in the UK from that point onwards. And about 4 years ago, joined Google into the role that I'm in at the moment. As you say, I've got a few side interests outside Google. I think that's really good for balance. It keeps me interested, and I love variety. So lots of fingers and lots of pies.
Right. And okay, so let's start perhaps with the coffee, eggs, and inspiration. Talk us through the inspiration for setting that up.
Well, for years, I've tried to meet 2 or 3 new people every week. Richard, you're one this week, and it's unusual to be on the other side of the camera, so to speak. But after, I'm very lucky to meet some really interesting people, and found myself sort of reflecting over my coffee and eggs, because it's usually a breakfast meeting, that this is super inspiring. I'm very lucky to. So I thought, well, why not film these, obviously with the permission of the person, and share them. And if at least one other person is also interested and inspired, then that's great. And as a leader in Google, I thought it would be a great opportunity as well to experience our platforms and the technology, specifically YouTube in this case, from a creator's point of view, and learn how to use AdWords and publish and edit. And I deliberately, some would say obtusely, chose to do all of the filming, editing, and publishing only on my smartphone.
Right.
My Google Pixel, of course. Because I often find myself doing keynotes in front of audiences, and it really is as simple as, if you've got an idea and a smartphone, you can become a creator and you can reach a global audience. And I wanted to prove that to myself, and also, prove it to others. And indeed, it's true. It's not BBC Blue Planet quality, but it works.
Right. And what have you found that there are any limitations you've had to overcome doing it just on the phone?
Well, COVID's been a pretty big limitation. Obviously, I can't do those in person, other than I've done one, I think, sort of socially distanced outside. But these days, I'm doing most of the interviews here in my home office using Google Meet and recording that. But in relation to the filming on the smartphone, not really. Most smartphones these days have really, really good cameras. They're very high quality cameras. And the main thing to do, I find, is get a really good microphone. And I can see you've got a fantastic microphone in front of you. So you know what I'm
thank you.
Yeah, that's the main thing. And to ensure sort of lighting is good. other than that, it's the technique, as you all know, underneath that of creating the environment in which that person that you're meeting with can tell their story, and staying out of the way.
Right. Yes. Okay. And I guess what's the biggest aha moment or the wow moment in terms of you and interviewing your guests over the course of the podcast?
Well, there's been many, and I've had really a huge variety of guests. I deliberately choose to try and surface stories that are remarkable in people who aren't necessarily on the front of the Daily Mail or the news. Ordinary people doing remarkable things. In other words, I've interviewed adventurers, Vicky Anstey, for example, who won SAS, the program, or finalist at least. Kiko Matthews, who rode solo across the Atlantic, having never rode before and having just had a tumour removed from her brain about 6 weeks beforehand. All the way through to people like Jamal Edwards, who founded SBTV and discovered, or at least distributed, artists like Ed Sheeran and Jessie J and Rita Ora and Emily Sande and many others in between. I guess if there's a golden thread, that's the epiphany, the aha that sits beneath. It's people are remarkable. You really can do anything if you set your mind to it. And I'm constantly amazed and surprised, as are my guests, about human capacity for physical adventure or endurance, for mental endurance in the tough times, for creative might and entrepreneurial talent.
And in terms of yourself, Craig, is there anything you've noticed you've had, places where you've had to grow, or mistakes you've made that you've learned from along the way as a host?
Well, sadly, I don't think this is a 6-hour podcast, so I won't have time to go through all of the mistakes. There are many, and they accumulate every day. I think the best, probably, as you mature, you realise that mistakes are golden, and if you're not prepared to fail, you never do risk a bit lower. So my attitude is to try stuff, be absolutely prepared to fail at it, and embrace and nurture those failures, because their accumulation is what amounts to experience at the end of the day. And so long as you learn from them, you're always moving forward.
Right. And where are you sensing that there's this theme of let's find inspiring stories from ordinary people who maybe aren't on the front of the Daily Mail? Are you sensing that that's going to be the continuing theme, or is it evolving?
Yeah, well, I think so. I think it's really important. It's a really good question, actually, Richard. I think it's super important to evolve. So actually, I've been reflecting. I'm about more or less a year into my podcast. I think I've got about 60 videos, interviews up on the channel, or piece of content. And the formula has been refined over that time, in terms of length, in terms of approach, in terms of intro, in terms of equipment. But I'm all for one, even if I think it's working. I think it's important to continue to change the game. So watch this space. I think I'd like to experiment with different things, and YouTube's a wonderful thing. You soon find out from the audience what works and what doesn't.
Right. And are you sticking with the phone? Is it going to remain a phone only?
Good question. I think so. I mean, it works well. I'm never limited by memory because it just goes into Google Photos and there's sort of unlimited storage on my phone, so it sits in the cloud. I don't see any reason why not. The thing I do see evolving is probably the quality of the microphone.
Right. Right. Yeah, well, I guess that's the thing with phones, right? You can plug so much into them now.
That's
You're
right.
really just using it for the camera in some ways, aren't you? So
Exactly.
yeah, no, that's right. So that's coffee, eggs, and inspiration. The next sideline is big community records. So tell us how you also became a music impresario.
I don't know about impresario, but that's very kind of you to say so. I kind of fell into that accidentally. I didn't set out to found a record label. After the referendum in 2016, I saw a face of Britain that I didn't recognise and didn't fully understand. What I noticed, and I'm not talking about the politics of Brexit, whether you're a Remainer or a Leaver, I don't really care. What I did notice is symptoms of a polarization in our society, that there's a privileged few who are beneficiaries of modernity, of digital technology, of business, of the education they've been lucky enough to have in this country. But there's a big section of society who kind of feel marginalized, left behind, pissed off. And that to me was disturbing, and I wanted to do something personally about it. Not just through my company, but personally, because I think it's up to us. It starts with us. And as a leader in a technology platform, I grew up in a pretty isolated country pre-internet. So everything that's happening today that we take for granted is like magic still for me. Right? If you've got a smartphone and idea, you can be a creator. You can start a micro multinational business. Yet it doesn't seem to be getting through to everyone. Opportunity is unevenly spread, it would seem. So I started working with a couple of young men from poor communities, from the so-called ends of London, one from East London, one from South London. And I took them on in a way as a mentor. I mean, they saw me as a mentor and I was helping them as much as I could with their life's journey. But I was also learning from them what life was really like growing up in a broken family, in a violent neighborhood. With an absence of role model, and trying to get my head around that, because that's not my experience. I've been very lucky in my life. And one in particular, Kwasi Court, he grew up with his bravery and his intellect and his creativity. He's a rapper. And he, like many in his situation, fell into a pretty nefarious lifestyle. Because to do music, right, if you want to be a rapper and put out music, you need time and you need money. And if you've grown up in that sort of community, there are not many obvious options for that. So he fell into, the so-called trap life, and that superficially served the purpose. He was earning some money, and it's bought him the time. But he had a wake-up call about 3 years ago when his friend and business partner was shot in the head and killed. And his cousin, around the same time, was stabbed. He was 15, his cousin, and fortunately survived, but had a pretty hot head and went and stabbed the person back and killed them and got 18 years in jail. And the combination of those two events for Kwasi were the sort of the epiphany, his wake-up call that he needed. And he sort of said to himself, I'm going to do music, but I'm not going to do it like this. This is not my narrative, which I felt was a hugely brave thing to do. So he went from what he was doing to moving back with his mum, doing a little bit of freelance work here and there, maybe earning 50 quid a week and grinding away. And that's the point that I met him, and I just felt he's a very open guy. He's a great learner. He's a great listener. He
Well,
reads
and
books.
how did you meet him? I mean, yeah, how
We
did that?
met through a mutual friend. So I worked with another young man called Joe Binder, who's got a very different story. He's a Cambridge graduate, grew up in North London, and um, Joe was a YouTuber when he was at Cambridge. Had a lifestyle vlog, and has subsequently founded his own personal branding company. And Joe and Quasi met in Soho one day. Quasi was filming. Joe recognized that this guy looks like a YouTuber. Both of them pretty open-minded chaps. So the young white boy from North London walked up to the young black boy from Mitcham, and they started chatting from very different. And this is the wonderful collision of worlds that I think is possible, right? When you're open-minded enough um, to embrace the unknown. And so Quasi is that sort of person, and Joe connected me with Quasi. And I just felt moved by his story. I thought, this is a guy who's got lots of talent. He's smart. He's taken some brave choices that aren't the easy road. And I invest in businesses. Why don't I think of this guy as a business and invest in him? So I literally Googled how to start a record label because I didn't know. And I found this company called Ditto, Liverpool-based company, great company. They're a music distributor. But when they were setting up that company, the founders understood, God, this is a labyrinth. This is so difficult. So they produced this record label in a box product, which I said, well, okay, I'll have one of them. And set up the company, funded it myself, and I signed Quasi as the inaugural artist for Big Community Records. And we set out on a mission to release his first album in the style of grime rock. So another collision of worlds.
Rock, right?
Grime rock. And that album, Blood on the English Carpet, came out in July 2020.
Right. And how's it doing? Right.
It's doing great. It's picking up a lot of interest on all of the digital streaming platforms. He's been offered a performance slot at Isle of Wight and Strawberries and Cream Festival. That was supposed to be this year. It's now going to be next year, of course. 2 weeks ago, we're filming this on the 10th of September. Quasi performed live at Notting Hill Carnival, which this year, for the first time in 54 years, was globally live streamed.
Right.
We did an event earlier this week with Lord Sugar and Karina Lepore, who was 2019's BBC Apprentice winner. So we're doing some views on the music videos. So it's doing a form of creativity is not an easy game. It's relatively easy to reach people because of the digital platforms that now operate. You can reach a big audience on Spotify, for example, or on YouTube. But getting noticed is really hard. It's a very noisy place. So it's a matter of sort of building a distinct persona and brand, really. And Quasi's got a wonderful story. So really, we're in that phase of getting his story out there.
It's a noisy place. Getting attention.
It's a noisy place, yeah. So we're in an attention economy. We're all hit with more information in a day than our medieval ancestors received in a year. So breaking through is tough. Even if you can be the best artist in the world, but you've got to, that the art itself is necessary but insufficient. You've got to build an audience. You've got to build a story. You've got to build a personality that people are interested in and follow.
Right. And how involved have you been in the creative process, or have you been hands off?
Well, happily not very. That's not my skill set. So Quasi makes the creative calls. He obviously asked for input, but I think you've got to let artists be artists and business people be business people. And so that's really the division between us.
Right. And are you looking to sign, so you've got Quasi, have you got any other artists, or what's the sort of roster looking like? Are you looking to grow it? What's the plan?
I've been very intentionally focused fully on Quasi up until the album launch and obviously subsequent to that as well. But I wanted to not dilute my attention. It is a side business for me, so I've got limited time, and I wanted to focus my energy and attention on the project that we set out to do. And now we're in the next phase. I set the company up as an enterprise with a social mission, which is to surface and celebrate creativity from lower socioeconomic areas and give them their stage to shine. So, true to that mission, I'd like to build that to about 3 to 5 artists. I am in discussions with a second artist at the moment. I'm going to keep the pace manageable. And already, it's easy, like the movies. It's you tend to focus on what you see in front of you. And in my case, it's the artist, it's Quasi. But to do an album, there's a big team. So there's a big team that sits behind the project that we've done, and will continue to work and support any further artists. Sabisu Malanga is the creative director. He's done all of the videos. He's a refugee from Zimbabwe, grew up under Robert Mugabe, saved up, bought himself a computer, taught himself how to code and how to do special effects, and he was the creative director on the videos. I've got Ben, who's doing PR. He was a sales guy at John Lewis, in furlough at the moment and handling our PR. Z Bamra, who's been my artist liaison person. Jada Bruni, who is the album artist, so the person who's done the artwork for the album. She's a young graphic artist from Croydon, amazingly talented, sort of cartoon-like quality to her art.
Wow. So you've
and although this and they are, it's 100% black and minority ethnic. That wasn't what it happens to be what we've landed on. And all of them have one thing in common: they're creative, they're brilliant, but they're all from backgrounds that have lacked the opportunity that perhaps I've enjoyed.
Right, and I remember a while back there was a study, wasn't there, of the top 10 artists, and some alarming proportion of them were not just middle class, I think, but sort of privately educated, right? And that has been a shift, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you say that. If by artists we're talking about musicians,
yeah,
the most popular British UK YouTube channel is Grime Daily, as it was called. And if you look at the music scene in the UK today, grime, drill, and various other subgenres of rap are the biggest genres, and that is absolutely dominated by black and minority ethnic Britons. So right. The interesting feature, however, is that so many of them create art in an autobiographical way. It's a form of poetry and storytelling about their experience growing up in urban Britain, mostly. And it's a great way of expressing it, and it's a great way of getting attention from those of us who didn't have that experience. But I think it is there's definitely more that needs to be done. If you look at BBC and the broadcasters, there's a huge effort and acknowledgement that black and minority ethnic presence is not where it ought to be. It's not, when you look at the television screen, unlike perhaps YouTube or other platforms like that, you don't see a reflection of modern Britain. And that's something that needs to change.
Right. Yeah, and you found a way to further that purpose in music.
Well, in a small way, but as I said earlier, I think it starts with us, and and it's up to me. So that's my effort.
Yeah, and that really brings me to my next question is around your capacity to do this. So you've got you've you've got Coffee, Eggs and Inspiration, you've got Big Community Records, you're also the Director of Strategy and Operations within Google UK. And how is this about you and your superlative time management skills, or is this about the culture within Google that allows you to operate in this way?
I don't think there's anything special about me as an individual, perhaps other than the choices. The choices that I make are perhaps a little bit different. But I don't, I certainly wouldn't put myself on a pedestal as being, as having a higher capability than anyone else. I think it's got a lot to do with the culture at Google. We're all encouraged to pursue passions. There's this notion of 20% time that's often talked about. And the spirit of 20% time is that you should feel free to pursue things that you're really interested in. And they don't necessarily need to be directly connected to the work. And the environment there is flexible enough to allow that, both from a time perspective and I guess an inspiration perspective. So I have a few side interests. This is one of them, and it's great fun. And I've got a very good team at Google. I've got a fantastic family, a very supportive wife and kids, and I try to be pretty strict about boxing my time and allocating it to the main thing, which is my day job at Google, but also making the time outside of that for Big Community Records and some of the investments and the YouTube channel.
Right. And take it, and taking your point about the environment within Google that allows for this. Just within your own, your own experience of managing your life in this way, are there any sort of habits or practices you've picked up that have allowed you to box your time in this way and to have these passions expressed?
So in terms of organisation, I find it important to batch process. Let's say, so let's take email for example. We all get an unhealthy amount of email, and it's I think the bane of many professionals' lives. I don't look at email other than 2 times a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. Otherwise, you can just bleeds away, and it distracts you as well. There's a lot of science around the need to have deep work time. Bruce Daisley, ex-Twitter, and
Former guest on this podcast, no less.
Former guest on this podcast. Well, he's a great guy, and he's got some really interesting observations, and he's very well studied in the area. But some of the evidence that Bruce talks about is the fact that to do deep work, you need to be heads down. You need to kind of have the hands on and not be distracted. And the switching costs, if you're constantly getting pinged or interrupted by email, are very high. You don't get back to it, really back in the zone, as it were, for another sort of 20 to 30 minutes. So it's important to batch things. I think it's important to set boundaries around work and around non-work. So I never work in the weekend. And at the end of the day, the email goes down and I don't respond. I put an out of the office message on both during the weekends and during my holidays. I will not respond to email. It's a monster that you feed, right? As long as you're sort of making yourself available, even if you're on holiday, it's a gift that keeps on giving. So if you just shut that off, it's remarkable what happens. You just get left alone because people work out there's no point in contacting you. So I think that's important. I think it's important to make time for the little pleasures and passions that you have outside work. For me, we've talked about some of them, but it might be sport or exercise or cooking or whatever it is. Sort of being intentional about that, so that you're living your life. Your life is not living you.
And have you found when you've put these boundaries in that there have been, relationships you've had to manage with other people within Google? Because I can imagine people listening to that and thinking, well, okay, that sounds fine in theory, but what about the reality of having a boss who's upset that you haven't responded on holiday? Or, have you found yourself having to manage relationships to make it work?
Look, I think the short answer is no. Not at Google. I think we share a common culture, and this is a big part of it. I think allowing work to bleed into personal time is a corporate choice. It's not a corporate necessity. And I've worked in companies where both states have been true. I had a long period at Accenture. Loved the company. Had a great experience there. Got some great friends there, who I'm still in touch with. But it's one of those companies who made the opposite choice. It's more of a sort of always-on culture, and I think that's a corporate choice.
Interesting. Yeah. And did you find in that environment that you couldn't set boundaries in the same way with an Accenture, or were you still able to manage your boundaries?
It was very difficult to set boundaries, or comparatively difficult to set boundaries. In hindsight, I should have been stronger at doing that. But there were many holidays that were interrupted, vacations that I needed to return early from, approvals that I needed to jump off whatever I was doing on vacation and attend to. And, I regret that. I think it's a poor indictment on a very traditional way of thinking in corporate culture to allow that to happen. Employees are at their best when they're relaxed, psychologically safe, energized, and rested. Things you're dulling down the talent that you've hired.
Right. Yes. And in fact, I was just referring to Google's Project Aristotle yesterday with some clients, and that was the research project that Google did on team productivity, and psychological safety came out as the number one factor. Right.
Yeah, super important, right? Psychological safety. I mean, it's one of those words that's bandied around, but I think it's the secret sauce to innovation. Google and others in the technology world are in a very fast-moving environment, and innovation is the lifeblood of the company. And history is full of the stories of companies who were really on top of their game and now no longer exist. And the half-life of companies is getting shorter and shorter. So it's clear innovation in a fast-moving world is absolutely mission critical. And if you want to innovate, you need to create an environment in which risk-taking is encouraged, in which people feel that they can be their full selves and, roll the dice and know that their colleagues are going to be by their side and pull them up by the arms when they fall over, rather than kick them and punish them. Now, it's important not to continue to make the same mistakes, right? You've got to build learning into that environment. But as Sir Ken Robinson famously said, if you're not prepared to fail, you'll never come up with anything original. So psychological safety is a necessary condition for creating that state, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. And just to give people an illustration of that, can you think of an incident that demonstrates that culture? Perhaps when you shifted from Accenture, say, first into that Google environment, what was it that struck you that was different? Is there anything that comes to mind that illustrates this?
Well, apart from the sort of obvious and superficial things like dogs in the office and hammocks and free food and that sort of thing, I think all of those are the outer clothing of something that lies very deeply within, which is a culture and a spirit of innovation where you treat serious things playfully and playful things seriously. And probably the best example, I'll give you one that your listeners might recognize, is Google Glass. You remember Google Glass? Yeah, these little frames that sat on the nose and ears like normal glasses, but they had a little prism and you could see a digital image.
Yeah,
And
I have to say, what I do remember from that is people getting the viral videos of people getting accosted in McDonald's or
well,
in
that's
bars
right.
now.
So, and this is exactly leading to the point of the story, right? The technology was brilliant, but the form factor was horribly misjudged. We didn't get the social engineering right. We got the technical engineering right. In fact, the people who wore these glasses in Silicon Valley became known as glass holes, right? Which kind of nicely sums up the mistake and the error. So that's at Google, and I think I try to do this in my own personal life as well. We celebrate our failures. We embrace them because they're golden learning opportunities. And although Google Glass is no longer a consumer product, it's proved to be a very interesting and useful industrial product where engineers are using it for, consulting instructions as they're changing telecom switchgear and inspecting oil pipelines. And a lot of the artificial reality or augmented reality technology inside it is in other products that are very successful. So there are in every failure there are nuggets of learning and harvestable blocks that often become part of very successful products.
Right. Now, my other question and as an interest here is that these are some of the aspects that the Google's become famous for in terms of its culture. Now, in your role, what are you seeing emerging in terms of new threads of changes within the Google culture that you can identify?
Well, I think like any other, Google's a normal company at the end of the day, in the sense that it's a collective of people working through the intervention of a global pandemic. So, and that, I think we've all had to adjust to that, to adjust to the routine of having a home office, of being on video calls, of coping with the absence of human contact in a face-to-face sense, mostly at work. And when you take away those sort of casual collisions that occur in office spaces, it does change the working environment. So I think, Google, like all other companies, is learning how to adjust to that new normal and keep the culture alive in different ways. So probably like a lot of companies, we're doing sort of different ways of getting together socially. There's virtual wine tasting and pub quizzes and this sort of thing that lends itself to a video format, a video conference format. We've had speaker series. We recently had Neil Malaki, a famous British comedian, come along and do some talks on how to make video conferences fun and how to use techniques of improvisation comedy in serious work. And these are things that probably wouldn't have happened outside the current context of the work from home routine. And I suppose you could describe those as cultural shifts. I think it's also an interesting environment to be in from a competitive point of view. It's a pretty hot market out there, and we're very humble about what we do as a business, and we feel very viscerally the need to continue innovating and delivering value to customers and building trust in our products. That's really the lifeblood of the company, and it's as important or more important today than it's ever been. And I think the geopolitical context that we all operate in is evolving as well, and that's not just a Google thing. That's true of all of us. We're going through an interesting period with Brexit in the UK. Let's see if the trade deals that are being negotiated come through in the way that we'd hope. But I think I'm an optimist on all of that. I think we live in an amazing country. It's my adopted country, with a long history of creative brilliance, of entrepreneurial brilliance, of invention, of entrepreneurship. And whilst it's easy to look at the gloom in the current context, it's more important, I think, to see the opportunity that lies ahead to establish ourselves as the most important technology hub and startup hub outside Silicon Valley, to celebrate the biotechnology and medical technology engineering that's going on in the strip between the Francis Crick Institute in King's Cross and the Cambridge and Oxford corridor, to celebrate British creativity. That we punch well above our weight in music and film and original content. So these are all remarkable things that are true of our island, and wonderful things that we must embrace and celebrate culturally in companies and personally.
Right. And I think it's interesting how you've answered that question. You've broadened it from a question of the Google culture to considering what's great about the wider culture in which we operate. And I think that's probably quite an important thing for us to consider. What can we celebrate in terms of the wider society we're a part of, and not just what we can make possible within our company, because the company, of course, exists within a society.
Well, Google's nothing more than a derivative business, right? We exist because users find our products useful, and small businesses, 60% of businesses in the UK are small and medium enterprises. Sorry, no, it's more like 90%. There are 6 million small and medium businesses in the UK, and they employ 60% of the population. And they're able to start and reach their customers, particularly now, largely through digital means, many of them free to use. So we very much feel part of the fabric of the country, of the economy, and we wear that burden very seriously.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think it's an important it's an important distinction, and I suppose it's reflected in all of your activities, right? You're active in society, in your communities, and I think that's what I'm taking away from this conversation. Actually, one of the things I'm taking away from this conversation is, to think a bit more broadly than just your organizational context.
Well, we all live in an ecosystem, a society ecosystem, and a business ecosystem. So it's very, I think it's wrong to disconnect yourself from that.
Okay. Well, talking about time boxing, Craig, I know I have you till to the top of the hour here. So I will thank you very much. In terms of people finding, clearly people know how to find Google, but finding Big Community Records, Coffee, Eggs and Inspiration, where should people go?
Well, you can link it below in the description, but it's bigcommunityrecords.com. And the podcast is Coffee, Eggs and Inspiration. It's a fairly unique name, so you'll only get me if you search that on YouTube. And it's also available as a podcast over all of the major channels, whatever you use, Spotify, Apple Music, or whatever.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time, Craig. Great conversation. Wonderful to connect.
My pleasure, Richard.
And look forward to getting this out here. Enjoy the rest of your day, Craig. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me.